While our country sorts out expectations of what a Trump presidency will bring, people who represent you at all three levels of government are on hand tonight. From your congressional team, Senator Mazie Hirono and Representative-elect Colleen Hanabusa join State Senate President Ron Kouchi and House Speaker Joe Souki. What do they expect to accomplish in 2017, and on what initiatives will they be working together? We'll hear from two of the four county governing bodies. Honolulu City Council President Ernie Martin is joined by Kauai Council Vice Chair Ross Kagawa. This live, post-election edition of Insights on PBS Hawaii starts now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Mahialani Richardson. Now that the 2016 election season is over, the real work begins for our newly elected leaders and those who will work alongside them. What can we expect them to accomplish this year, and how will representatives on the federal, state, and county levels work together to find solutions to the problems facing Hawaii? Tonight, part of our congressional delegation will talk about their top priorities for 2017, and they'll outline how they plan to work together with each other and the state legislature to fulfill their pre-election promises. Then we'll turn our attention to the chairs from the Honolulu City Council and Kauai County Council. How will they deliver solutions to the problems plaguing our counties? We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions and comments, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org. Now, don't forget to call in your questions early for our congressional and state leaders, as they will only be on during the first half of the program. Now to our guests. U.S. Senator Mazie Hirono was elected to the United States Senate in 2013 to fill the seat previously held by Senator Daniel Akaka. She's the first and only Asian American woman in the U.S. Senate and was the first female senator from Hawaii. Senate President Ron Kouchi was just re-elected to represent the state's 8th senatorial district, which includes Kauai and Ni'ihau. He's been in the state Senate for 6 years and has served as Senate President since 2015. And Representative-elect Colleen Hanabusa has recently won 2 races. One was to finish the term of late U.S. Representative Mark Takai. The other race makes her the U.S. Representative for Hawaii's 1st Congressional District. State Speaker of the House Joe Souki planned to be with us tonight, but late this afternoon, his office called to cancel his appearance, and he sends his regrets. Thank you to all of you for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Great to be here.
Thank you.
Well, Ms. Hanabusa, I got to start off with you. You are celebrating, but also mourning at the same time. Is mourning the correct word to talk about the presidential election, and celebrating to talk about your 2 wins recently?
Well, you know, it's from 2008, I've been a Hillary Clinton supporter. And matter of fact, I have this brooch on, which is called Breaking Through. It's made actually very famous by Madeleine Albright. And the artist who created it is a woman from Los Angeles named Yvonne Shimoyama. And, you know, we were waiting to be able to tell people, this is it. We've broken through. And unfortunately, it's not. So part of my mourning is continuing to wear the brooch, because it is to say, I don't know what happened. And so you're right. It is something that, you know, you makes you wonder what happened, or what is it telling, especially us elected officials, about the temperature, the climate, and what's going on in our country.
Yeah, and that's the question. You know, you listen to political pundits and the pollsters, and they said, I'm sorry, we failed, we got it wrong. Mazie Hirono, you've been someone who has championed for women's rights.
Yes.
And the climate right now for a good portion of Hawaii is fear. What can you tell people right now?
I think that it's very clear that this presidential campaign really showed that there's a lot of fear and anger, frustration about the future of our country, and so that really manifested itself in this election. And I think what's really important for us all now is that we can't let fear dictate our path forward. Especially for our delegation, we're going to be working even harder, and working with, I intend to continue to work with our legislative leaders as well as our mayors and our council to make sure that there are a couple of things that I think we really have to pay attention to. One is, for Hawaii's economy, the rebalance to the Asia Pacific is critical for our national security as well as Hawaii's place in the military. So I want to make sure that there is a continuing commitment to the rebalance and the recognition that this part of the world is critical, important. It has China, it has India, it has North Korea. So I know that Colleen is very familiar with the need to continue to support the rebalance because she served on the House Armed Services Committee as I serve on the Senate Armed Services Committee. One of the other things, if I can, we know that the Republicans are going to do different things with the Affordable Care Act. If they don't repeal it outright, and this time they have a president that will not veto such a repeal, they might start taking it apart piecemeal, and we have to make sure that Hawaii's prepaid health care law stays intact.
But how would that be possible when President-elect Trump has vowed to get rid of it as soon as possible?
Well, I think that Hawaii's prepaid health care law is really a state action. It's a state's ability to be able to pass laws that will benefit its people, and I'm hopeful that most of the Republicans care about a state's ability to take care of its own people in this way. So we will be paying a lot of attention to make sure that our prepaid health care law that keeps our people in Hawaii among the healthiest in the country stays intact.
Senator, President, can you weigh in on that?
Sure. We were are in the process with Governor Ige of applying for a waiver from the Affordable Care Act because of how well our prepaid health plan works. One of the reasons why our enrollment numbers were so low here in Hawaii and made the Health Connector so difficult to be successful is because of how well the prepaid healthcare worked here in Hawaii, and a lot of the national legislation was modeled from Hawaii's law about what was right. So I certainly agree with Senator Hirono that we need to make sure that our prepaid health plan stays in effect and we continue to provide the coverage and service for our residents.
You have some physicians who are worried, or they say that free birth control, that might not be around anymore. Do you share some of those same concerns?
I see Congresswoman-elect Hanabusa
I was going to say that one of the things that people did not realize, and Mazie was in the House at that time, and when the when the Affordable Care Act got passed, is that Hawaii had an exemption in the law, but we did not exercise it, and this is really weird, but I remember the section is 1560, a 2,000-page bill. But it was an exemption. We did not exercise it. So what Ron is talking about is really kind of silly, because what we're now doing is taking that law that we had an exemption for in the act itself and trying to use, I think it's section 1321, which talks about an innovative plan. Imagine 1974, around there, that we had prepaid. It was recognized. Mazie and Senator Akaka and Senator Noy worked so hard to make it an exemption. Then we didn't exercise it. And now we're taking that same exemption that we had in the law and saying, basically, leave us alone. The two states that could not make the Affordable Care Act really work was Massachusetts and Hawaii. And we had the best health care available. But like Ron said, we couldn't make it work. It's just crazy.
Well, the thing is that there wasn't that much of an understanding of how Hawaii's law worked. It's basically the most extensive employer mandate law in the country. No other state follows suit. Massachusetts has a version of it. And so it was really critical that I worked really hard on the House version of the Affordable Care Act to make sure that Hawaii's exemption was very, very clear, and that we would not have to go seek waivers, et cetera. A lot of that is interpretation, but it's not the Senate bill that got passed. It was not the House bill that got passed. It was the Senate bill that got passed, totally just intact, and we didn't have the ability to make any amendments to it. So it's one of the reasons that we now have to seek this waiver. But again, going forward, it's really hard to tell what the Trump administration will do, along with his colleagues in the House and the Senate, with regard to the Affordable Care Act. So we just have to be very vigilant, because it's critical for Hawaii that we keep the prepaid health care law intact.
What are your colleagues in the Senate saying about this in terms of predicting how, you know, this new administration will trickle down into the state level?
Well, I don't want to paint my colleagues in a bad light, but we're really not saying much right now because we were so stunned by the result, and we're looking at each other and just saying, wow. I still can't believe the election results, and we're still just trying to wrap our mind around what's happened. I was so optimistic that with a good showing by Secretary Clinton, coattails the other way, that the Democrats are going to take the Senate back, that Senator Hirono, Senator Schatz were going to be well positioned, and we were looking for a real bright future for Hawaii. Over the last 3 years, in the time I've spent in Washington, D.C., and some of my colleagues, we've established great relationships with second and third tier level members of the Obama administration who we were optimistic would continue to be D.C. Mayor Carvalho, with our congressional delegation's help, recently got a $13 million Tiger Grant, the first grant of that type from the Department of Transportation. I think Secretary Fox was talking about coming to Hawaii possibly in early December. And, so we were, really focused on our path forward and the great things that we were going to do. And, you get punched in the stomach, and we're trying to recover. And this is the first chance I've had to talk to both Senator Hirono and Congresswoman Hanabusa since the election to say, what are we going to do and how do we create that new path forward?
But Ron, you know that Colleen and I are fighters.
Yes.
and so we're going to make sure that we get as many of the resources that we need to Hawaii, and that's why the rebalance to the Asia-Pacific commitment is important, because that's going to bring military resources that will keep that part of our economy strong, and it also has a lot to do with our own national security. But for myself, I intend to continue to work with my colleagues across the aisle. Jeff Sessions, who was the first senator to endorse Donald Trump, he helped me get my first bill passed from the Senate. And I talked with him, I appealed to his humanity, literally, and I touched his heart, and I said, I know that you care about our Filipino friends and high on relief. And so I work across the aisle. We're going to find different programs that we can support. And so the Trump administration, we'll see what he does. But we'll continue to work with our colleagues across the aisle, as we always have.
I think what's critical to recognize is, and Mazie is talking about when we're both on armed services, but the National Defense Authorization Act is probably one of the best vehicles in terms of passing law. And we're all legislators. So the one thing we know is you need to have that vehicle by which you can literally put things in that that everyone has something in it that they want, so that's what's going to pass. And that was what, people like Senator Inouye were masters at. They knew exactly what we needed to put in, and that's what we got to continue to do. So we've got to make sure that Mazie is well positioned in SASC, and I'm hopefully going to get back in my position on the House Armed Services, and those bills begin in the House. And we need to get it in, and if we can't get it in, they need to get it in, and we both need to work to getting it past conference. And this is, I think, one of the first years that the NDAA is still in conference.
Yes. So when we get back before the end of this year, we will very likely pass the National Defense Authorization Act. And because we don't do earmarking anymore, that means that the authorizing committees such as the House and Senate Armed Services Committee will be very critical for Hawaii, because that's where we put in all kinds of language that's going to be helpful to Hawaii.
I wanted to go back to what you said earlier, Senate President Kouchi, that this is the first time you've been able to sit across the table from Colleen Hanabusa and Mazie Hirono, and you haven't been able to ask them the questions from your point of view on what's going to happen. Do you have any questions for them directly? That's right here.
No, I've got the message. They're going to go up. They're going to fight. They're going to do their best. And at this point, tomorrow morning, since I'm here tonight, I'm going up to Punch Bowl, honor our veterans, and then it's time for us to get over the malaise or depression of the election results. I think what makes the democracy function and makes this country great is that peaceful transition of power. The voters have spoken. We need to accept it. We need to now move forward, and we need to create the plans that are going to put us in a better place.
And it looks like that was happening today between President Obama and President-elect Trump. One of the questions is, we don't really know what type of President Trump will be. Is he going to fly off the handle? Is he going to be restrained and presidential, as we've seen in the last week or so? Colleen Hanabusa, your thoughts on that, and some of the issues of Native Hawaiians as well, and what about those indigenous entitlements?
Well, we've had problems with indigenous entitlements even with just a Democrat president. Absolutely. Simply because it's the houses that were controlled by the Republicans. And so I think that that's going to be a major challenge, but it's philosophical on the part of what the Republican agenda stands for. Having said that, however, as Mazie knows, one of the greatest advocates that we have for Native Hawaiians is a Republican, our good mutual friend, Don Young from Alaska. And, quite candidly, when the seat became available, he was the call I got. The first call I got saying, okay, you got to come back because you got to help me with American Indians and Alaska Natives, plus, we'll of course work together on Hawaiian issues. So it is reaching across the aisle, and it is someone like Don Young, for example, who is second in seniority in the House, the whole House, second. And he is the longest serving Republican, and the oldest Republican, and he's there. So that's what it's going to be in the future. It's going to be reaching across the aisle and being able to cut the deals, and hopefully we can all be together, all working, whether it's for a broader category of all indigenous people, all natives people, whatever it takes. That's what we got to do, right, Mazie?
Yes. Don Young is a great friend of both of ours, and Don and I worked together to save Native Hawaiian education programs. And he cut an ad for me when I ran for this seat, and believe me, he did hear from Mitch McConnell and a few other people, but he said, you're the person for Hawaii, and I'm going to work with you. And he was really happy working with Colleen because he found in her another fighter for Native Hawaiian programs. But we are going to need to keep pushing, because there's a lack of understanding among some of our colleagues about the importance of supporting these kinds of programs for the indigenous people. So we've come together, the Alaska Natives, American Indians, Native Hawaiians, joined together because we're stronger.
We've got some questions from some of our viewers, and for Ron Kouchi. Will anything change in the state Senate now that the entire body is made up of Democrats? So Sam Sloan, longtime Republican, that lone voice will be gone.
Well, the first thing I'd say on the other question of the insight into President-elect Trump, Senator English, the majority leader, actually wasn't stymied. He did say that it's posted online the first 100 days by President-elect Trump. It's just that he's made so much news about things that he said we haven't really read what he's written. And so I think that his advice was good. Go back, get online, look at what they have presented as their 100-day plan, and let's begin in reading what they've put out and try to get some insight and try to do the best we can. The first big change is that we now speak of the Senate position, not the Senate majority position, because there is no minority.
It's the majority of the majority,
yes,
right?
The Senate position is, because it's all Democrats. I said at the press conference about the new leadership lineup this afternoon, though, that the Democratic Party we refer to us as being members under a big tent. And under the big tent, there are many diverse opinions. And during the last session, we've had spirited debate on third reading for the bills. And a lot of it is Democrats who have a different point of view on the most effective way for us to move forward. And so I still expect to have some of that vigorous debate, but In Sam's case, he was consistent on the issues from a Republican point of view, and so certainly that will be missing, but it's also reflective of what the voters want to see. They've lost a member in the House. The Republican Party is shrinking here, unlike what's happening on the mainland. And I know that our economy through tourism and construction has been thriving. I don't think that everyone has felt left out. And we did pass a bill last year to say we'll build 20,000 affordable units by the year in the next 10 years. We are committing money again to homelessness, and we're working hard to deal with those most disadvantaged in our community. Human services from all sources of funding for the first time has exceeded education as the most money spent in the state budget. So as the boomers are going into retirement, as people are living longer, and as we continue to commit to take care of our pre-K education and those less fortunate in our community, I think that that's why we've been supported and the Democrats are so strong in this state.
Can you make any, let's say predictions or see how things would fall at this point in regards to general excise tax extension for the rail project?
I believe it needs to get a fair hearing. But also the last extension that was approved was taken from the financial chart submitted to the legislature by heart. I think Congresswoman-elect Hanabusa has done a great job in bringing validity to the numbers. She's asked the hard questions, and she hasn't sugarcoated any of the information. But for it to have a potential to get support, everybody's going to have to believe that the numbers we're talking about are real, they're accurate, and if something is going to be done, that this is going to achieve the goal that we're all trying to reach.
Colleen Hanabusa, what changes from your perch, let's say in Congress, moving from overseeing the rail project from your role before going into Congress?
Well, I also have another advantage, and that is that it is not well known, but my chief of staff is Michael Formby. So I am taking Michael with me to Washington, D.C. So for issues like HART and transportation in particular for the state, I feel that it's like hitting the ground running. However, having said that, the difference now is that you do have a Republican administration plus two houses. So the question is going to be whether they begin to advocate for or fight against infrastructure, which is really where President Obama was heading and Democrats wanted to head there. It says we need to do infrastructure, we need to build. Rail is usually funded by what is called a New Start program. Hawaii was one of the largest New Start program amounts in the nation. So chances are we are not going to be able to get that enhanced because of the fact that they've already funded to a certain point. And we have an agreement with the federal government. It's called the Full Funding Grant Agreement. So that's not going to be amended or changed with, I believe, additional federal funds. So we need to be real about that. So it's going to come back to the legislature and the city council. And I know the criticism that many in the legislature have is they say, the city and county of Honolulu doesn't have any skin in this game. I'm sure Ron has heard that continually. It's our GET because it's a state tax. The GET is a state tax. So they've got to put skin in this game. And now the question is how the feds will play. Now remember, part of the amounts that we're talking about for rail is $1.55 billion of federal funds, which we don't have all yet. So that's in jeopardy unless we come up with a plan that the feds will buy into. And we can be assured of one thing, and I believe a Trump administration is going to scrutinize whatever agreement we may come up with. So I'm unfortunately not to punt it to Ron and the legislature, but I'm punting it to Ron and the legislature and the city council because it's going to come to that. And the question is going to be, okay, how committed are we?
I mean, pretty much the federal government has said that the $1.55 billion is going to be it. That's what is there for under the agreement. And I'm glad that Senate President Kouchi has said that any extension of the GET for HART will get a fair hearing. I think that's really important. And that message that there should be just total transparency, and that's something that Colleen really pushed for in terms of what the actual costs are going to be, et cetera. You need that information in order to make that decision. Now, at the same time as we're going forward with some uncertainties regarding the Trump administration, you mentioned, Colleen, infrastructure. That is one of the things that I think he has talked about, wanting to support. So that's something that we can work on. That's job creation, job creation, short-term and long-term benefits. So I'm hopeful that there are some areas that we can work on. Now, one group that I'm really concerned about, as he talks about he's going to undo President Obama's executive actions, is with regard to the Dreamers. Right. These are the young people who came to our country before they were 15, and he had a program called DACA that would forestall them being deported. So over 500,000 of them came out of the shadows. They signed up. If this president undoes that, where does that leave over 500,000 Dreamers? And there are a number of the Dreamers in Hawaii. I'm already hearing from them as to what's going to be in store for them if he gets rid of this executive action. So those are some of the things that I worry about going forward.
I wanted to jump onto a question from Aaron in Honolulu, and he wants to know, what are the panelists' thoughts on repealing the Electoral College, and what are they going to do about this? It's something that comes up whenever this comes up, the election. It happened in 2000, as we all remember. Do you think that's even possible?
When did we pass it? 2004?
What?
To
support the popular vote. Hawaii has already adopted that, I thought.
I don't know. I don't think so. Have we? Have we passed that? Maybe
I mean, people are talking about it right now, but it seems as though it kind of subsides and then we forget about it. I mean, is it realistic to think that the Electoral College we would vote against it?
Because my emails coming in today are saying, while we've passed it, please don't undo it. So Hawaii has spoken, and part of our concern before there was some understanding about not having the media impact elections is the exit polls. All these announcements were being made, and the election was called before people voted on the West Coast and in Hawaii, and so we wanted our votes to count, and thought by going through the popular vote when everyone mattered that Hawaii might get more attention paid to it.
I think there will be a spirited debate about what to do about the Electoral College, especially as Hillary Clinton won the popular vote and Donald Trump won the Electoral College vote. So I think that there might be some resistance to along those lines. But it's a good debate to have.
But it's always whenever you're on the losing side,
yes,
right? So the question is, okay, where are you on this issue when you're on the winning side? It's almost like I think the Senate, we see it a lot with cloture, right? When you're the minority, you want cloture, but when you're in the majority, it's like, well, we're the majority, so we should pass it. So it really is a matter of the reality is, where are you in terms of the balance of power in that particular situation?
And someone wants to know, for Mazie Hirono, what are your thoughts on the protests happening around the nation, and are these strictly Democrats, or do you think it's a combination of both parties?
I think it also reflects the continuing divide and the anger and frustration in our country. And to the extent that many of the protesters are young people, I think that to see them engaged, I think that is a good thing. In fact, I just read an article that said that if we just count the votes of the millennials, Hillary would have won every state except 4 of them. So I like the fact that young people are going to be engaged and they care about the future of our country.
Does this reawaken maybe some people who sat out?
Well, I hope so.
Election?
I hope so, because this was such a critical election that you would have hoped that everyone would have decided that truly the direction of our country was at stake, and they would have come forward. I always say, though, it's better late than never, as long as they stick it out. If they just do these protests for 2 weeks and it's all over, then no, that's not going to make much of an impact.
But remember, in both 2000 and in this election, we had an independent party. So that's the other thing, is that the so-called protest vote for the independent candidate that's the question, right? Al Gore had Nader. So and that's part of our constitutional right, is to pluck that vote down, and to not vote one, but to pluck that vote down for somebody who you say, well, I don't like either of them, so I'm going to go here. Even if you know that that vote will not count, and in an election like this, made such a great difference. Yes. So, but it's always 20/20 hindsight, and we see what will then happen the next time around. Mm-hmm. But you can't do that analysis in isolation of what exactly was going on. And I think what we elected officials got to realize is it is a strong sense of discontent and people being angry and upset. And it's really against people like us.
I just wanted to go around the table really quickly because we're going to have to wrap up our conversation soon. But Senator Hirono, what's the one thing that you want to accomplish in the next year?
Well, I want to make sure that that we represent Hawaii in as effective a way as possible. And for myself personally, I will continue to, as I tell my staff, there are people getting screwed in our country every single second, minute, hour of the day. And if by our efforts we can decrease that number, we will be making a difference. We will be doing our jobs. People come to my office every day, and all of our congressional offices, with problems with immigration, with Social Security, with veterans. So we help them, and by doing that, we will be doing our jobs, making a difference. I will continue to do that, regardless of who's in the White House.
Senate President Kouchi, what would the one thing that you would want to accomplish in the coming year?
Clearly, the support for education at all levels, pre-K, K through 12, and our university and community college system. Education is the ladder of opportunity to close the income gap, to allow our children here in Hawaii to rise up and have a better life.
Colleen Hanabusa, you get the final say.
I had the opportunity of teaching the University of Hawaii earlier for the spring semester, and the name of my course was Civil Liberties in the Time of National Crisis. So if there's one thing that I want to ensure is that as we move forward as a country in this time, is that we never forget the civil liberties of the people. And part of them we may not agree with, but notwithstanding, that's what makes us the greatest country on the face of this earth.
All right, well, thank you to you all for joining us. Just short after some fireworks on Tuesday. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Well, during elections, we all know that certain topics will definitely be a part of many conversations: patriotism, characteristics, what we'd like to see in a new president, and controversial issues like rail. Tonight, Hikino's student voices from Lokelani Intermediate School, Waimea Canyon Middle School, and St. Andrews Priory have covered all three topics. Now, when we come back, we'll hear from Honolulu City Council Chair Ernie Martin and Kauai Council Vice Chair Ross Kagawa.
My father was my hero, so this flag was given to the school in his memory. He was the most patriotic person that I ever knew, and the fact that he served in 3 wars. He served in World War II, in Korea, and Vietnam. And I mean, even till today, he's gone 11 years, but he's still my hero. He always gave his all. He always taught us to give our all, but he also taught us how to love our country and how to be proud of our country. And he made us proud. And this is one way of keeping him close to me, to make sure that every day he was still a part of me. And so that way, with the flag flying up there, it always reminds me, Dad's watching. Dad's watching.
We take you to Waimea Canyon Middle School on Kauai, where student voices respond to the question, if you could vote, what qualities would you look for in a U.S. president?
In a president, I would look for somebody who is nice, does the right thing, and makes the right choices.
In a president, I would look for somebody who is fair and can listen to both political parties.
Someone who can listen to the people and boost our economy.
I would look for someone who can reduce taxes because people are having a hard time paying bills and enjoying life because they can't travel or buy things due to not enough money.
It's someone that would take care of the economy and listen to the people that have hard problems to take care of and to stop crimes.
If I could vote for president, I would want somebody responsible and able to communicate with others. For example, getting along with others in a community and being responsible and organized. Also, I would want somebody with good passion towards other people.
I would want a president who listens and understands what changes are needed for our country.
I'd probably vote for someone who could make a promise in an advertisement but keep them, or someone who I would personally believe would make a good president.
The qualities that I'm looking for as a president is a president that can boost our economy by lowering taxes and getting more jobs so people could earn more money.
I would want someone who gives a lot of job opportunities because right now my dad is having a hard time finding a job and paying the bills.
And now to St. Andrew's Priory in Honolulu for their Student Voices segment. The question, are you for or against the proposed Oahu Rail Transit project?
I'm more neutral about the rail because I feel like it would be very beneficial to our islands, but detrimental at the same time.
I'm against the rail because although everybody is obligated to pay for it, I won't be using it myself. It's out of my way to have it being built, even over burial grounds for Hawaiian ancestral grounds and whatnot. It's just, yeah, I wouldn't use it personally.
I feel like it would affect a lot of people in a positive way because it's such a easy way of transportation for them to use, and it's more eco-friendly. And given the fact that we've put so much money into it already, I think it would be a very wise thing for us to continue.
I'm against rail because taxes are being used to compensate for construction. Everyone pays for taxes, but not everyone's going to use the rail.
We could be spending our money that we put into these efforts to fix our roads and to just make Hawaii a more eco-friendly place.
I feel that from what I've heard on the radio, on the news, and what I've heard from my parents, that having rail would probably be very beneficial for that side of the island just because it would help ease congestion, and I know traffic is terrible over there.
I am against rail because I feel like there's already so many transportation systems to use in Hawaii. People use cars and there's the bus and people can carpool and whatnot. And I already use the bus, I'm comfortable with the bus, and I don't really want to use the rail. I feel like it's already taking up a lot of space and money, so I don't think I'll use it.
Some great insights from our students. Well, welcome back. Now it's time to turn our attention to the important issues facing our city and county governments. Joining us tonight are Honolulu City Council Chair Ernie Martin, who has held the post since 2013. He represents Council District 2, which covers the areas that include Mililanimauka, Wahiawa, Laie, and Kahalu'u. Chair Martin holds a Juris Doctorate degree from the William S. Richardson School of Law. And Kauai County Council Vice Chair Ross Kagawa joins us as well. He was re-elected to a second term on the council this week and also serves as the chair of the council's Public Works and Parks and Recreation Committee. Now, we invited representatives from the Hawaii and Maui County Councils, but both declined. But thank you to both of you for joining us tonight. We sort of have to talk about the presidential election right off the top because it seems to permeate every single conversation, every level of government. Chair Martin, why don't I start off with you? Sure. And what is your reaction to now President-elect Trump, and does this impact the council from your view?
Well, I was surprised that Donald Trump was elected president, you know, but I got to give him credit. I mean, he worked a very vigorous campaign. But, you know, since the election, I mean, reality sets in. I mean, with regards to effects on the council itself, it's more the city and county of Honolulu. I think both myself and the mayor had talked about the opportunity after the presidential election to go back up and visit with the FTA and to see if there was opportunities for us to get additional federal funds, you know, for a rail project. I think we were hoping that the election would have turned out differently. With a Democratic president, we would have a stronger chance. But now with Donald Trump being elected, I think it's a more difficult path to travel. And I think it just will put greater responsibility on the county to work with the state legislature to meet some of the challenges we have. I know I was watching a Senate president when you was interviewing him, and when you asked him what was one of his objectives in the upcoming session, and I was hoping that he would say to extend the GET surcharge to help the county with its shortfall. So, I mean, definitely we're going to have to roll up our sleeves, but it is what it is. And, you know, rather than crying over spilled milk, we got to move forward.
Right. Well, there's, you know, there's no more Republicans in the Senate now.
Yes.
So does that play out more in your favor?
Well, the fortunate thing is we do have a number of former council members who serve on the Senate. Of course, Donovan Dela Cruz, Stanley Chang, who was most recently elected. I served with Stanley in my first term. And we have Donna Mercado Kim. So, you know, it helps to have that pre-existing relationship. On the council itself, we have 3 former state senators. So, you know, that relationship that's already existing, I think, gives us at least a heads up and a significant advantage in making the necessary arguments to convince the legislature that it's a necessity for us to extend the GET surcharge.
Ross Kagawa, I wanted to ask you, what's the mood on Kauai right now in regards to the presidential election?
Well, I think, you know, and don't want to correct you, but I just got reelected to my 3rd term.
Okay.
But yeah, the mood on Kauai is the same. I mean, you know, we heard the CNN and they called it the greatest upset in history. And so everybody's in shock. But, you know, yet, you know, being a, you know, athlete, you know, I know that when the game is over, there's no sense in crying about it. And, you know, let's move on. And like, you know, Ernie talked about the counties, we got enough problems, you know, at our level. I think, you know, the federal government, they got to worry about their own business. But, you know, I look at one bright side in that when President Obama was there, you know, I've tried communicating because we have an issue with the no shearwaters and our Friday night football games, which are not allowed because of the problem with the no shearwaters. And I don't know, maybe Donald Trump will help us out and, you know, allow us to play Friday night footballs on back again as we did in the past.
Right. Expand on that a little bit more in terms of that controversy.
Well, I mean, you know, Kauai is a small island. We don't have the University of Hawaii. We don't have, you know, other large events like Honolulu does. There are times in the past when we could get as much as 6,000 people at a Friday night football game. And, you know, now with the ruling that has been in place for about 7 or 8 years, I believe, we are not allowed to play, you know, about the last 6 games of a 9-game season. So therefore, instead of having 6,000 fans enjoy Friday night football, we have Saturday daytime football, and we have perhaps maybe 1,000 or 1,500 people. So, you know, definitely a huge event that, you know, I know the environmentalists care about the birds, but really, when we ask them what is a major factor in that's affecting the shearwaters, and it's actually the feral cats and rats. So, you know, my thinking is, why are we penalizing the people of Kauai that enjoy something so much when we're not even the main cause? The lights are a minor cause. We should focus on the feral cat and rat problem, and I think that way the numbers will go up and we can enjoy our football.
So you're thinking that under a Trump presidency, you know, people view him as being not so friendly toward the environment, and so that would be more friendly toward maybe this athletic event, or
I don't know. You know, just when something is not, you know, nothing is done for so long, then maybe somebody new will help us in that area. So I'll be sure to send a letter to him and his staff right away as soon as he gets in office, and see if he can, you know, koku us a little bit, at least maybe allow us to play 2 or 3 more games instead of the whole elimination of 6 games.
Chair Martin, I wanted to turn back to what you were talking about, the rail project, and under, you know, this future Trump presidency, he has said he wants more dollars to go toward infrastructure.
Right.
So how could something like that affect the rail project and other issues like potholes or, you know, creating better roads?
Well, definitely, I think with regards to infrastructure itself, I mean, if you look at rail transit, it is an infrastructure project. I think if there's opportunities for other sources of funding that we can utilize to augment the project itself, you know, rail in and of itself, if that's all Honolulu was to focus on, then it'd be a failure for us. I think it's the opportunities that rail present with regards to some of the development, like transit-oriented development, an opportunity to really revitalize Honolulu is something that we need to focus on, probably going forward, with the election over. And a lot of it takes infrastructure investments. We have aging infrastructure here in Honolulu. Although we're investing a lot with regards to sewer upgrades, there's still a lot more that can be done. I think it would definitely present ample opportunity. I know the previous speakers talked about the lack of affordable housing. 20,000 more units, affordable housing units are necessary within the next 20 years. It's a goal I think that we need to strive for. My orientation has always been to do it sooner rather than later. So now while we in the midst of heavy construction, it only makes sense for us to do the necessary infrastructure improvements now rather than later to provide those opportunities for workforce housing, affordable housing, for other types of development, so Honolulu can truly advance as a community.
You mentioned Senate President Ron Kouchi didn't say, well, they're going to pass the GET tax exemption, but what else can the council do to make sure that rail is funded?
I think what he said was the direct message that I think all of us need to hear. With regards to our efforts to convince the legislature that it is a necessity, I think in the information that is brought forward before the legislature has to be information that is accurate, that's reliable, that's fully transparent. I think the last go around, there were some errors that were made that cast doubt whether we really represented the most accurate and transparent picture. So going forward, I think collectively, both the administration as well as the council needs to be very consistent in our representations, working with the authority itself. And I think, it's not just a county investment. This is a state investment as well with respect to the project itself. What a lot of people have to realize is a lot of the properties along the rail line are actually state properties. And I think when rail is completed, the opportunities for the state to sort of magnify or increase their investments will be well worth this effort.
Vice Chair Kagawa, why don't you talk about, what we're talking about is development. And on Kauai and on neighbor islands and Oahu as well, there's always a conflict between development and rural land. So what would your priority be between development, rural land, and what we're talking about is agricultural lands as well? Yeah,
Same with us on Kauai, affordable housing is, a very important issue that is very hard to solve. I believe it's actually going to take all of us, the county level, the state level, and the federal level, to work together and try and figure out what happened to, our market values. Why did it just run away from us? And why is it so difficult now for this generation to buy a house? What they're calling affordable housing in Honolulu, 500,000. And in Kauai, we have a new development in Honolulu where there's duplexes that's being built. I think D.H. Horton is a contractor. And, the big sign says prices as low as 440,000. And, realistically, for people, middle class people and lower class people, 440,000 is not affordable. So I think, how we go about solving this problem is not as simple as it looks. But, definitely it's all about keeping balance. We certainly don't want Kauai to look like Honolulu. I think, part of the attraction of visitors is that it doesn't look so much like Oahu and Maui. And, we want to keep our look as much as possible rural. It's very important. And, I think that's what the people want. But, I don't have an easy answer to how we're going to solve, our affordable housing at this time, but it's going to take a lot of cooperation with everybody.
We're starting to get some comments and questions coming in from our viewers. And this one for Ernie Martin, your friend, Frank Terrazas Jr. called and said, actually, it's old friend of Ross, rather, wanted to tell Ross to run for mayor. He said, and aloha. Thanks, Frank, for your comment.
I don't think I'm mayor caliber.
You never say never, right?
You are. That's never right. Never say never.
For Ernie Martin, it's been no secret, this is a viewer question, it's been no secret that you and Mayor Caldwell have had your differences and that you supported Charles DeJoux. Obviously, he didn't win. How does it continue to affect your relationship with the mayor?
I don't think really it has any effect. I did support his opponent, but the election was held. Kurt Kaua prevailed. He is the mayor. But I think, a lot of the differences of opinion that, or general in ideology between the council and the mayor, is the evolution of the process itself. I mean, that's the natural discourse in government. You have the legislative branch, you have the executive branch. There'll always be differences of opinion. What people have to realize is that on 95% of the issues we agree. It's that 5% that we don't agree on is where the media tends to focus on. But for example, with regards to the rail project itself, me and the mayor, we stand side to side. When we went to the FTA, we were in the same room. We made the same arguments. I think we made a very convincing argument with respect to our project and with respect to giving us a little more time to come up with the revised financial plan, the recovery plan, to provide a real viable option for the FTA to consider. And I see that relationship continuing. I think, with regards to homelessness, the mayor has made that a priority of his administration, so has the council. I know the Senate President was proud of the investment that the legislature made. I can say I'm proud of my colleagues that we invested substantially more than what the mayor had proposed in his budget. And as a result of that, I think we've made good progress. And I think I see that continuing, going forward with my colleagues at the council.
You talk about homelessness and, you see the stories of people who are homeless. There's not one size fits all. And it is a slow process. Do you think that solving the problem is moving fast enough and is enough is being done to help these various factions of homelessness?
Of course, like anybody else, I would like to see us move faster. But I think if you really understand the issue, it's a very complex issue. It's a not one-size-fit-all solution. I think that's what makes it a more difficult and probably more time-consuming than the general public would hope. But I think, with respect to where we stand currently, both the state and the city have made substantial investments. I think what we need to do is actually strengthen our relationship with one another to leverage the resources we have had invested. I think the private sector has stepped up to the plate as well, has done an outstanding job. But I think better coordination of services would help leverage what we have, especially now. I think it's very tight. It's a very tight market federally to get federal funds. They've changed some of their priorities, so more so, I think both at the state and the county level, progress is being made, but I think we're not satisfied. And I think going forward, I think you can see both entities continue to make substantial investments, and hopefully at the end of the day, we can really make a significant difference on this issue.
One of the issues on homelessness is kind of those hidden homeless. People who have relatives or they stay with them, they might live in their car for a certain period. What can the county council do on Kauai for these hidden homeless?
Well, I think I got a kind of different outlook on it. We have like a couple areas where we have a lot of beach encampments, large ones. One is behind the airport, the Ahukini area, and then we have another one by Waimea River mouth. It's a Russian Fort area, and there's a lot of people living there. But one of my plan is to try and address how much of those homeless people are born and raised from Kauai, because I believe they should be the priority first, and then because I seem to see a lot of and I talk to a lot of them, and they're not from Hawaii. So I'm thinking, if they were already homeless, how did they come to Hawaii? So I'm thinking that some of them are being sent over here from the mainland with a one-way ticket. And, I think we need to realistically find out, what is the gamut of the local homeless problem first, because I think those should be the priority first. It shouldn't be, we put a whole bunch of money and help, all of them. I think, we should take care of ours first, right? I mean, it just makes more sense to me. So I think that's part of the solution I would like to see, is that, we try and figure out how are these transplant homeless coming in, and what can we do to, help them maybe get back closer to their families in the mainland.
As we move forward, looking into the new year, what would be your #1 priority?
Well, I think definitely the budget, and trying to fix and rebuild the infrastructure without taxing the local people. And Local people are already struggling with federal taxes, state taxes, sales taxes, GT taxes. Up to 40 to 50% of their income is gone with taxes, and then they got to pay utilities and everything. And so, when you're asked by the administration, let's fix the infrastructure and let's raise a tax, it's very difficult for me because the people in my circle are middle class and poor people. So, I hear it from them all the time. Do all you can to cut your budget. There's a lot of waste in Kauai County's budget. I see a lot of workers standing around that could be doing more, and those are the reasons why, like Ernie said, I get along great with the mayor, but it's also good that I am openly critical of our mayor because we need to get down, operate like a for-profit business, and get down to the bare bones, do more with less, like the private businesses are doing.
And Ernie Martin, we have about 30 seconds left. We are going to go online a little bit later, but
See, Ross, you
in
cut
terms
me
of
off.
your, sorry, you're
so passionate, man.
Your one priority for 2017.
I think going forward is to work cooperatively with the administration. We have a lot of challenges, that we are facing. Of course, rail and homelessness. I think we've made some good momentum. We want to sustain that momentum. I think, fortunately, little change at the council, and with the mayor being re-elected, I think going forward, we can continue to progress and hopefully address the concerns of our constituency.
And we're going to get to more on that in our online version of PBS Insights. But we're going to wrap up the live broadcast right now, but we're going to continue the conversation for our online viewers. Just go to pbshawaii.org to continue watching our show. And mahalo to both of you for joining us tonight. We wanted to let you know that we did invite representatives from both Hawaii and Maui County Councils, but they declined our invitation. Now, in the X Insights, we may think below the belt attacks, bullying, and antagonizing social media posts are only limited to the recent presidential election, but we've seen many of the same behaviors and rhetoric right here at home. Issues like homelessness, GMOs, and rail have divided communities, and at times the political conversation has been downright ugly. With all of these grown-ups behaving badly, what's the impact on children? Is this the new norm, and how have we changed? That's next time on Insights. I'm Mahealani Richardson. Ahui ho.